The presidential election is going to hinge on the results from California. And the vote from California is coming into our elections central slowly. There are 9 states, actually, where the races still are too close for NBC News projection desk to pick a winner. Of the 9, Nixon is leading in Alaska with 3 votes, California with 40, Montana with 4, New Jersey with 17, Ohio with 26. NBC News has just projected Wisconsin in his behalf. 12 electoral votes there. Now, Humphrey, on the other hand, is leading in Missouri with 12, Pennsylvania with 29, Texas with 25, let's see, in Illinois, we now have Nixon back in the lead. Well, so on the basis of assigning arbitrarily the electoral votes to the candidate leading in the popular vote at this moment, we must say that the whole issue is still very much in doubt, and therefore could come down to the state of California with the 2 candidates virtually even. And California could yet, at some early hour this morning, some late hour this morning, resolve the entire thing. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, indeed, rest with California. David?
Here are the other four states still in doubt, beginning with New Jersey. We have 86% of the vote counted, and it's still too close to call for reasons you can see there. 46% of it for Nixon and 45% for Humphrey. A difference of about 48,000 votes out of 2,700,000, something like that. Ohio, big industrial state with 26 electoral votes. Either candidate would be delighted to have it. At the moment, Nixon has a lead of about 110,000 votes, and he has 46% to Humphrey's 42. Pennsylvania, 92% in. Humphrey is ahead, but not very far. 47% to Nixon's 45. And Texas, 85% of the Texas vote is in. Humphrey has a lead there, but not a very big one. And again, we don't know how much of the Texas vote we're going to get tonight or today. It's 5 o'clock now in the east, because as we reported earlier, a computer in Dallas counting some of the votes broke down, and I don't know how long it's going to take to fix it. John Chancellor. John?
I've been checking the various surveys that were made by people involving the votes to be cast in some of these states which are still uncertain and now becoming critically important to the outcome of the election. Illinois, as we said before, had been unanimously predicted for Nixon by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Newsweek survey. Ohio had been unanimously given to Nixon by the same 3 organizations. New Jersey had been given to Nixon by the same organizations, but with a little less certainty. They hedged a little bit on New Jersey, but both the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Newsweek surveys gave that state to Nixon. Missouri had been given to Nixon by the same 3 organizations. Texas was a toss-up in all the polls and surveys. Nobody would guess anything on Texas, but in terms of Pennsylvania, here's another state that, pardon me, that is in the balance, and all of the surveys gave that to Nixon. Now, I think this is important because the surveys so far have had a rather high degree of accuracy. And if they were actually determining the true intent of the voters at the time they made the polls, and 2 of these surveys were made and published around the 3rd of November, they were very late, then Nixon, in terms of these uncertain states, has a little bit of an advantage. And I think that's about all we can say now. The mathematics of it are fairly clear. If he wins Illinois and California and Ohio, then either New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Alaska, Missouri, and Texas, a combination in there, will put him over the top. And I think we just have to wait for a while and see. Indeed, the votes may not be in tonight for us to determine that. But in the meantime, somebody?
Those surveys are extremely good. in the states they gave to Nixon that you were reading there, Nixon is ahead in all of them except Pennsylvania. It's very close there.
Well, Illinois is an interesting state, David. If you think about it, it reminds me very, very much of 1960 when John Kennedy was running in Illinois against Nixon, and we had the same sort of thing at almost the same hour. And the spread now is not
8,000.
It's 8,000, and that's what it was in the 1960 election. It was 8,000 odd votes that went to John Kennedy when a Chicago vote, if you'll recall, I think it was 100 or 200 or 300 precincts in Chicago, turned up quite late in the evening, and that pushed Kennedy over the line and won him that state's 26 electoral votes. And a lot of people say the election, at least the Chicago Democratic Party has been saying it won him the election for a long time. And it's quite interesting to me to see that we're in the same position at the same hour now, 8 years later, in that interesting state, Illinois. Something to think about. We'll be back in a minute.
Milk.
Nobody's claimed any victory, by the way. No one. There were speeches and statements by Humphrey, Muskie, Agnew, Wallace, and LeMay. And we're going to put them on now in that order.
May I take a moment just to thank you, first of all, for your patience tonight. You have waited a long time, and I have waited an equally long time. And I wanted to take just a moment to come here to express my thanks to all of my many friends, particularly here at home, and the many that have come from other parts of the nation, for your wonderful support, and to tell you that I feel sufficiently at ease so that I want to get a good night's rest. Some members of my family have already seen fit to retire in confidence, and others have decided to stay up. But we have, as you know, several of the very important states that are nip and tuck, where the decision, I'm sure, will not be known until sometime at least late tomorrow. And if you want to stay up to wait for all of that, I'm all for you. But you've been watching the television, and you've been listening to the reports, and I believe that it's fair to say that we have done much better than most observers had thought we would, and about as good as I thought we would. Now, there are critical states yet to be heard from. They're not finalized as yet. States such as Ohio, and Illinois, and the states such as California, the state of Washington. And as you know, this is at best, as we put it, a Donnybrook. Anything can happen.
We don't worry about it.
So close that the chances appear to be increasing that the election may be thrown either into the Electoral College or into the House of Representatives. Does that frighten you?
Well, I think it would be better for the country if we could decide the election one way or another today, because I think to leave it undecided for weeks or months could create a great deal of unrest throughout the country, which might be harmful. I gather that about 35% of the vote is in, at least it was when I left the motel, and that if it goes into the House, it'll be for a reason we didn't anticipate. That is, the Wallace vote isn't really as strong as we thought it might be, and so if it goes into the House, It'll go into the House because the two leading candidates are so close in so many parts of the country.
You seem to have about 57% in the state of Maine. Does that displease you?
Oh, it could be better.
Have you talked to Vice President Humphrey at all this evening?
No, not yet. I expect he's had as much difficulty getting to a phone as I have. Most of the evening has been sort of in the nature of a homecoming, and it's been good to see friends. And for those of you here in the audience, the photographer for Time magazine has been traveling with us, gave us a show of his slides. It lasted about an hour. It was a great show for those of us who've been on the trip. And we've done that and met family and friends and had some good Maine lobster and clams. You know, I tried to avoid looking at the television set until something came in rather definite.
Well, it is a rather late hour, isn't it? Something like 25 minutes of 4. And I guess everyone has been watching with as much interest as I have back at Government House, and it's perfectly obvious to anyone that the results are inconclusive at the moment. I do feel that trends are developing that are very helpful to the ticket, and I feel most optimistic. I've talked with Mr. Nixon on the phone just about 10 minutes ago. He shares my feeling that these trends are developing in a most satisfactory way for us. We certainly aren't predicting at this moment a victory. We are feeling to some extent encouraged beyond what we expected to be at this hour. I want to express my appreciation to the people here and the people across the country for the wonderful support they've given the team. And I would guess that there'll be no substantive announcements, conclusive announcements this evening. I imagine we'll have to go a few more hours before we get to that. But I did want to come down here and tell you how much I appreciate your personal involvement and your loyalty in being here at this outrageous hour of the evening. To understand that nobody's chasing anybody away, that you're perfectly welcome to stay as long as the human body and stamina remain.
Who are here tonight for the great part you've played not only in our movement in Alabama, but having made it possible to go into other states of the Union, and for the first time in our lifetime to place our party on the ballot in all 50 states. And you can rest assured that this movement has had its impact because of you. And it looks now that we're going to get several millions of votes in the country. And it means that we have spoken for a large segment of the American public. And in fact, as Governor Griffin said, during this campaign, both candidates began to sound as if they had found some speeches written by both of us here in the Coliseum tonight. So again, let me thank Governor Brewer and his staff, General and Mrs. LeMay, and I want to thank my family who have been very tolerant in my being away so long, who are here with me tonight, my mother, my son George, my daughter Lee, my daughter Peggy, my daughter Bobby and her husband Jim Parsons, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law who are someplace with us tonight from Tuscaloosa, right here on the stage. And I want to present all of them to you and tell you that I appreciate all that they've... I do want to present to you Mr. and Ms. Burns, Governor Lurling's mother and father. The
my remarks here, let me say to the press and to the news media that the election is not over yet.
I think it's a little bit early to talk about the results of the election yet. Governor Wallace is better qualified than I am to discuss that anyway. It was just 32 days ago that I made the decision to join Governor Wallace in his crusade. It only took me about 3 days to convince myself that I'd made the right decision. I have spent a long time, over 2 months, trying to analyze the pros and cons of taking this step. And I knew what the odds were of winning, and this had nothing to do with the final decision that I made. I believed that before any balloting took place, that I'd accomplished most of my goals. Certainly, we've made a tremendous impact on the country that's going to be felt for a long time. If you add the popular vote of the American Independent Party with the Republican Party, the last figures I saw came nearly 60% of the American people who are dissatisfied with the trend toward socialism that we've encountered in the past 8 years.
There are now 7 states in which no decision has been made, and in some combination of those 7 states resides the decision as to who will be the next president of the United States. The popular vote board now indicates that 83% of the vote is in, and in the percentage column, the 2 candidates, Nixon and Humphrey, are virtually in a tie, with Nixon about 300,000 votes up. Insofar as electoral votes are concerned, Nixon has 195, Humphrey has 137. Nixon needs 75 more to win the election. Now, these states, Alaska, with 3 electoral votes, Nixon is currently leading. But with only 30% of the vote in, Nixon 47%, Humphrey 43%. California, 47% of the vote is counted. Nixon with a slight advantage, 47% to Humphrey's 46%. Illinois, 79% of the vote is in. Again, the 2 candidates are virtually in a tie. Missouri, 94% of the vote is in. Humphrey with a slight advantage, 45% to Nixon's 44%. Pennsylvania, 92% of the vote is in. Humphrey with 47%, Nixon with 45%. And finally, Texas, 85% of the vote is in. Humphrey with an advantage of 42%, 39% for Nixon. We shall be back in just a moment.
These are the kind of men we had in mind when we designed the super rugged, super waterproof Bulova Ocean.
Daniel Brewster for the Senate in Maryland. Republicans Goody, Bell, Morton, and Hogan have won Maryland congressional seats. In Virginia, Washington suburban Republican Congressmen Broyhill and Scott have won re-election. The only clear winner in the D.C. school board race is civil rights activist Julius Hobson, who won the at-large seat. All others face runoff elections later this month. Virginia voters approved the $81 million bond issue. Northern Virginians approved liquor by the drink, also approved rapid transit, as did Prince George's County, Maryland. Full color 4.